And we will just go from there. So, hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Circle Up and Get Real, where you know by now that we have conversations that matter with people who matter. And the secret is everybody on this podcast is someone who matters. And I am thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, Kim Dupont-Madinier, who I met in San Diego at NLP Train the Trainer training. It's kind of a theme lately. If you've been listening to the podcast, I met a lot of cool people there, Kim, you included. And we sat for a while and had a conversation, never long enough. I don't know how you felt about that, but I felt like
Yeah, definitely. It could have gone on longer for sure.
so Kim has a really interesting life journey and a career choice, which I found fascinating. So I'll just give you a tiny little bit of her very extensive and impressive bio. She has over 10 years of experience in architecture, building science, research, and development. She's led international teams in the development and application of sustainable building technologies in higher education at the Rhode Island School of Design, social enterprises through a Fulbright scholarship in Mongolia, and multinational corporations for St. Gobain's U.S. Off-Site Construction Initiative. Now, this is so weird. If you look at Kim, if you see this and you're watching this, she's just a beautiful young woman. And not that there's a stereotype, but Kim, young women aren't in this industry. So I need to know how you became the founder of Atelier, Dupont-Madinier, whose mission is to redefine our material imagination of the built environment by offering a new spin on experiential art and textile architecture. So, wow. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I want to know, Kim, how you got here. We'll talk about where you are, but you're in Boston right now. And how did a woman get involved in a man's world of architecture, and not just architecture, but like going and actually building?
That's a great question. I would say two things. So first, I was very fortunate when I was a freshman at RISD. I had an amazing architecture professor, and she was my 3D professor, but she happened to be an architect. And I had a internship when I was a teenager in France in an architecture firm, and didn't like it very much. It was very dry to me. I was more trained in the fine arts when I was younger. And I love the way she spoke, and I love the way she held herself, and just how she just had such a way of unfolding information and seeing the world that was so poetic. And I asked her for advice because I was picking my major. And I told her, I was like, I think, I love the way you speak, and I really look up to you, and how you present yourself, and how you think about things. And I'm just wondering why you love architecture so much, because my experience with it was that it's just flat planes and straight lines. And she responded in the most perfect way possible, which was, well, there's so much you can do with a line.
Mm.
And so I think that kind of triggered my curiosity. And then when I started architecture, I always had a theme of using textiles in my projects. So even my first studio project, I was using burlap and trying to find a way to like pull apart the weave to make it structural, right? So I think that's what launched my passion for architecture, or my journey in architecture. And then I always had a way of bringing with me textiles into the mix. And I was incredibly blessed, and still am, because my first architecture professor, he was the one who told me about the solar decathlon, and that year when we applied for the competition, it was taking place in Versailles in France. And the cool part is that the solar decathlon allows university students to design, build, and fundraise their own solar powered home. But we gave ourselves the additional challenge of not only making it solar powered, but making it a passive house that was made out of textiles. So a passive house uses 90% less energy than your average home. And the way you do that is by strategically designing the building envelope for that energy conservation to take place. So it was like a quadruple whammy, right?
Yeah.
I got to learn how to design, build, and fundraise the house of my dreams by the time I was 21. I was going back and forth to France, which was great. So I got to go home, see family. And I was using the materials of my dreams and also being able to save the world at the same time by, designing something that was sustainable. So, I mean, so blessed, right? So that's what kind of catapulted me at that point into this field. And I think it's just always been one question after another that I've always sought to seek answers for. And I'm very much like an experiential person, just naturally. That's how I learn. That's how I engage with the world. That's how I even design. And so for me, I needed to do it. And there was just no other way around it.
So I want to back up a little bit. Now, you kind of alluded really quickly to your upbringing in France. So I'd like to hear more about that, how you were raised in France and how you ended up at the Rhode Island School of Design. It's kind of an interesting journey, at least for us in my part of the United States, where people pretty much stay pretty close to home. So I'm curious about how you got from France to Rhode Island.
Sure. So my mom's American and my dad's French. And when we grew up, we were moving around a lot between the U.S. and Europe, mostly for my dad's job. And so it's very natural for me to kind of be a nomad of sorts, right? And then, yeah, I think I was very fortunate because I think I spent certain critical years of my life in different countries, which was very obviously had an impact. We lived in like the suburbs of Chicago between like 9 and 13, so that was great. As a kid, when you can just walk out on the sidewalk barefoot and play with your friends, right? And that's also where I really started drawing much more rigorously as a kid. And then when I was 13, we moved back to Paris, and that was an amazing experience as a teenager. I mean, of course, I still had all my woes and all of my teenage
Angst,
yeah. But what's beautiful, I think, about the French culture is that, when we were teenagers, we were buying like €3 bottles of wine and going to drink on the Seine, and then we would like have debates about Sartre and like Rimbaud, and but it's beautiful because we were like having existential discussions as like 15, 16, and I think it's great that you're encouraged to do that, or that it's like culturally revered, right? And so I think that was also very formative as well. And then ever since, I think I stayed in the US after I came to RISD. Well, I chose to come to RISD because I had this, it's the #1 art school in the US, so it's obviously a great honor. But also I think I was very interested in a more open curriculum. Like when I was a high school student, I was not a bad student, but I definitely struggled a lot. I was playing catch up, and the French system is very rigid. It's very it's not easy to get caught up on, basically. I was an anxious kid and spent most of my time ditching class. So I thought it'd be a good idea to go to a school where I could, get involved, and where the curriculum was more open. So I think it was perfect because it's almost like a lot of my like party phase, or like, young adult phase was taken care of almost like in Paris. And then when I got to college and undergrad, I was very clear of making the most of it because I knew it was this huge financial commitment, especially in comparison to, you know, how much it costs to go to school in Europe.
Mm.
Um, and for me, it was just like this big, not, I would say burden in some ways, because I wanted to make it count because I
Yeah.
realized the sacrifice my parents were making and allowing me to do that. So, and ever since I've stayed in the US, just because it was just opportunity after opportunity that I was able to latch onto. And yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you also alluded to that, being chosen early at 21 to be
Mm-hmm.
part of this award or win this award. Could you tell me a little bit more about that? You kind of glossed over that. That's kind of a big deal.
The solar decathlon
Yeah.
competition. Yeah, so well, I was like 19 when we applied, and there's 20 university students that around the world that designed, built, and fundraised their own solar powered house. And for me, it was again just synchronicity after synchronicity, where it just so happened that I could like restructure my curriculum to cater to all the design courses that we needed to get this project off the ground. And then I was French American, so I was fundraising between the US and sponsors in France. I was like finding housing for the team. So I ended up becoming the student team leader kind of naturally because of my level of investment. And I had always pictured myself moving back to France and continuing the next chapter of my life there. So I was even more eager to like get as close as possible, right? And I mean, it was absolutely amazing. I think that project, as well as my Fulbright research fellowship in Mongolia, I really have so much faith in humanity in during those times, because it's like we have these short sprints and all of a sudden there's all these people who come out of the woodwork and they're here and ready to help. I mean, of course you still need to pitch and sell and find common ground and identify how the collaboration is going to be mutually beneficial for everyone involved. But I think ultimately the fact that people have this ability to organize and accomplish so much in such a short amount of time, I think for me that's my favorite part of these kinds of initiatives, is that experience of working with others, and feeling that really deep and profound connection and appreciation, because ultimately you're working for something that's so much greater than you.
Yeah, you were talking earlier about your curiosity as a kid and your ability to have the existential conversations so early and to dig in. And I
Mm-hmm.
think all of that leads you to where you are. No accident, just a coincident. I love the word coincident because it isn't an accident, it's coincidental. And as you
Mm-hmm.
think about all of that, you mentioned it kind of put you in the right place at the right time, and it's again coincidental, not an accident. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you think about your upbringing, your um are you a dual citizen?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
your dual citizenship, your interest in art, your
Mm-hmm.
interested in just being aware of the teacher who you asked to talk about this line in another way, as you did. You heard something that she maybe, I don't know, maybe she didn't even know she said something the way she said it, but you picked
Mm-hmm.
up on it. And I think when we are innately curious and we are not asking questions to be catching somebody at something, but only because we have this curiosity, that's where you find, it sounds like, the resources you need and the people and the cooperation to achieve something way greater than you probably could yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And your career, from what we talked about in California, has continued to unfold in that way
Mm-hmm.
as you've built it. So after you were in, well, let's talk about Mongolia for a second. We didn't talk about that. The Fulbright scholarship. Tell me about that. And when did that happen in your career?
So after RISD, I worked for Saint-Gobain for 2 years. They needed designers to help build out their design platform, because they were starting to use design thinking and other, more well-known processes or strategies today that are now more common in terms of product development. And while I was there, my objective was to have a bird's eye view of the industry. And I think I was ultimately disheartened and also humbled simultaneously. I think I was very idealistic. I had gone to RISD and I had done this huge project, and I was like, why aren't these corporations saving the planet? Like, it's just very simple, right? In terms of my, unconscious incompetence, right? And when I
Well,
got there,
I'm going to call that I'm going to call that idealism. I'm not going to even call that
idealism, yeah.
unconscious incompetence, because I think it's that kind of energy and that kind of belief in the goodness of humanity that gets tapped down for
Yes.
reasons that are not even valid. It's all
Mm-hmm.
based on other people's fear. And so,
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go
no, no,
ahead.
no, you're good. I mean, I don't know. That's just my theory about it. And
Mhm.
being in a space with you, being in person with you, and experiencing your energy, which, by the way, is not geographic, because
Mhm.
it's still possible to connect with people virtually, and I
Mhm.
do with you, and um, that is something that I don't think a lot of people know how to take seriously.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess I would say that it's maybe the right way of saying it would be, I think I was very, you know, I was very idealistic, and I was like, look, we as human beings make up the rules that we live by in our society, right? Like 100 years ago, a lot of the technologies that we had didn't exist. Our social and cultural values were different, right? Um, so why not make up new ones, right? It's up to us to make believe, right? Um, and I think what was valuable about that time is that I realized that these big manufacturing companies are beholden to their manufacturing lines, and a lot of the people working there are just everyone's just in the motion of things. So it's like this big Titanic ship that you can't just like turn last minute. It needs to very, very slowly pivot, right? Because it's just a lot of inertia. Uh, and it propelled me to go to Mongolia and ultimately build a second version of the textile house that we had built for Solar Decathlon. And I always knew I wanted to go to Mongolia because, well, especially after the Solar Decathlon, because some of the feedback that we got from the judges is that we weren't addressing a social need. So I obviously didn't forget that comment. And that was like the next question I needed to answer, right? So how do we address the social needs? So that's what caused me to move to Mongolia. And I mean, that was amazing because I arrived there knowing two people via email, and by the end of the 14 months was able to design, build, fundraise the team, the project, and build a team. And for me, I mean, once again, wow, like humanity is amazing. I was the only American person on the team. It was an all Mongolian team, and I barely spoke any Mongolian. And people are so willing to try. They're in their stuff, or they're in their like list of priorities that they already have to get done. So when you come in and you can gather resources and you can facilitate and help and help them accomplish even things that are within their values, but they just haven't
Mhm.
been able to like break that ceiling.
Mhm.
I mean, it was amazing for
Mhm.
sure. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So 14 months, you built what exactly? The prefab homes, bespoke prefab homes?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what
Mm-hmm.
it was? How many were you able to build, and how were you able to keep that sustainable once you left?
So I only built one passive Gers, because one was already very hard to do.
Yeah.
um, but I did find an investor who actually um, basically bought the rest of the design and wanted to build 13 more.
Hmm.
And I was in contact with him after I left, trying to kind of support and facilitate and help them. But ultimately, it like I couldn't, unless I was there on the ground, like the project wasn't happening. Like they just needed someone to coordinate and get all the pieces going. And think a lot of the momentum, even though I had made it a point to make it a Mongolian project and have it be the design customized by local individuals, I think ultimately um, I didn't realize how big of a part I had in terms of all of the organization, coordination, and like initiation of
Mhm.
everything. So.
Well, I think you wouldn't, I don't suppose. I mean, do any of us really know the impact that we have on a project or a person or a situation until we get into it?
Mm-hmm.
And once you recognize that, I know I have my notes because I watched the video. You have a video on your website that's really compelling. If you have a chance, anybody who's listening, I'll put the link here, about seeing the bird's eye view of the way it was set up there was what you wanted to do, the building industry. And you wanted to have an impact on a global scale. It was, we agreed it was idealistic, maybe not in unconscious incompetence. It was just
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
idealistic. And I love that you just did it. You just said, I want to know more about this. I want to know how I can make a difference. And you did it. You didn't just talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt to me when I was with you in California that you don't think about the word no.
I do definitely. I
Do
mean,
you? Because you don't seem like it. You're like, I'll just go in spite of what
yeah,
other people might think.
definitely. I mean, like, look, I get told no all the time, or like people don't. You know, when I arrived in Mongolia, a lot of people told me that I was working on the wrong project. They wanted me to make energy efficient Western style homes because a lot of the trend was that people saw Western style living and they didn't want to live in the like local vernacular housing typology because it was really efficient and there was all these like challenges in terms of living in a Gers because you have to take it down 4 times a year
Oh,
to air out the felt because it's not properly ventilated and resistant against moisture, and it is meant to be this structure that you travel around with based off of the
oh,
seasons, right? So um, there was a lot of feedback that I was getting initially where people were like, you're focusing on the wrong thing, but the NGO that I was partnered with was committed to that goal. So I stuck to it and it was totally worth it because by the end of it, people were like, oh, well, we now know it's possible because she did it.
wow, wow.
But I think to answer your question about regarding no, I think there's certain times in my life where I've been really fortunate because I followed my gut, and I kept going. Sometimes it also doesn't help because sometimes I should let go and like walk
Yeah.
away or not keep pushing through, right? Um, so I think actually it's been interesting because I'm figuring out the balance of like when to listen and when to pivot. I think is it's more. I think in my case, it's more a question of like how am I gonna change the direction of my inertia versus like no, I have this idea in my mind and I'm gonna keep hammering all the way.
The
No
way
matter.
I hear that is the distinction between commitment to the greater good and attachment to the how it happens. So
Mm,
if you're attached to the how it happens, it's more about you. If you're
mm,
committed to the greater good, it's more about being flexible and being able to pivot and recognizing that your impact well, the impact you as a human can make is greater than your vision of it
mhm,
sometimes. And I
mhm,
think that's what I'm learning from NLP as well, which is where we met. when we were at training for NLP. I'm curious about how you got involved with neurolinguistic programming and how does that fit into this story?
I had gone through some life events, and I think I was really disconnected with myself and my like who I was, because I mean, it's like, to go back to almost the point that you were making earlier, it's like I have a lot of energy, and I can like really like burrow through on projects, like um and I had been working on a project which was just not successful and kept getting worse, and I just didn't want to let go. And then when I finally let go, I just was almost like cataleptic,
Mm,
frankly, because
mm,
it was like the first time in my life where I couldn't just work through it. And I think what was amazing about these trainings is that it helped me release a lot, and it helped me also understand how I was at cause for things not working out in the way I'd hoped. And because I realized, NLP is a lot about this, so it stands for right neuro linguistic programming. So you can hear how someone's unconscious mind works based on how they speak. So you can ultimately transcend their veil of consciousness by being able to speak their language, and you can more easily find common ground with someone. And that for me is like one of my top 5 values, without a doubt. I truly, deeply, fundamentally love common ground, and which is, I think, why I enjoy being part of a team so much, is because I love creating that shared space or shared common good. And so those NLP trainings were huge for me because they helped me, get back to my core self, my core sense of being.
mhm.
And the specific training that you and I went to, I saw it as like a public communication course, right? And I had, frankly, felt like I had lost my voice and was very, hmm, had become very meek and
Mm,
almost stuttered, right? Uh, and I think it was very helpful for me because it helped me kind of confront a lot of communication fears that I had. And just, I think, was one of the most transformative trainings that I've been to, of that organization, because it just fortified, I think, my commitment to my company and what I want to accomplish, and being able to communicate that in a succinct and um, clear way so that other people can join. And actually, what a gift, because I found my GC, who I'm now like partnering with for the company. And like, I swear to God, it's like we're kindred spirits
wow.
from another lifetime. Like, we've known each other for almost maybe 2 months now. And it feels like we've known each other for eons. So what a
Well,
blessing. Hmm.
that's what's available though when we transcend all of the falsities and all of the fear and all of the posturing and all of the stuff that we don't know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the thing that I learned. I mean, I learned a lot of things. I The communication piece and the confidence and all of those were amazing. But for me, what was even more meaningful were the relationships and the people that I got to know and the people that I've now had on this podcast based on who I met there, you included.
Hmm.
There's just something different, even in a short conversation. You and I had a short conversation. We didn't spend a ton of time together, but there
Hmm.
was just something, a shared value system.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe I'm not put on the earth to go build homes in Mongolia and to be doing the things you're doing, but your spirit is the kind of spirit that I want to be connected with. And I
Hmm.
think in whatever way we can promote and support and challenge each other, to live our full lives, no matter what we're
Mm,
doing. It's not the do necessarily. It's as you said earlier, it's being at cause, so that when we're
mm,
at cause, we connect at the cause level instead of at the effect level.
mhm. Big time.
And
And
when
also,
you,
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, when you met your GC, when you met this person, when you said it felt like we've known each other for lifetimes. Well, yeah, because really that's how it works, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it's such a gift because it's like him and I are at these like transition stages in our lives where we both have this shared same like life vision or like outcome that we want for the company um and to help people and to make an impact from that perspective. And I just think that um it's I'm it's beautiful the way synchronicities work out for us, right?
So tell me about where you are then. Tell me about your current company and what you're doing. And I'm going to try it. Atelier, Atelier,
Atelier, yeah.
Dupont-Madinier. Oh,
Atelier
goodness.
Dupont-Madinier, yeah. It's very French. I had different names for the company for different periods. I started about a year ago and was initially the long-term objective for the company is to develop housing for displaced populations. But in order to do that, first I need to approach it through a different strategy so that I can optimize the building technology. And I ultimately came to the conclusion of calling the company Atelier Dupont-Madinier because a few things. I found out over time, well, I knew this when I was a kid, but I never made the connection until recently, which was that both sides on my dad's side, so his mother and his father, they both own their own textile mills.
Wow.
So my grandfather, he owned like more of a commodity textile mill, and my grandmother, they owned more of a high-end textile mill where they, had silks and, really beautiful dyes and patterns that they would produce. And I, when I found that out, I was like, huh, interesting. Like maybe that's where it came from. And there was some transmutation of information somewhere along the way. Um, so that was really beautiful, and I feel like it's the house too, right? Like it's a fabric energy efficient home that's futuristic, and yet still when people see it they're like it's a yurt, and I'm like it's not a yurt, but sure. Like because they're like they just think like fabric, or like they're like it's a tent. But what's beautiful about that is that tents or yurts or teepees or wigwams, all these different type of textile structures, they're very distinctly connected to um, primitive or not. I don't want to say primitive, but like original structures of our past, and yet like we are using all these advanced materials and like assembly methods to take it into the future.
Mm.
So there's this really beautiful kind of back to the future situation taking place. And the what I like is that now I get to take, I think mm, one of my great joys is working with textiles. And when I was working at Saint-Gobain, I didn't get to do that. And ultimately I was also deeply unhappy because I hate vinyl siding and it's just not the company for me. And I realized how much I value the materials that I work with. So it is harder for me to do my best work. So I think just cementing the company in this like narrative that like we are a textiles architectural company that builds these energy efficient homes, that is like absolutely everything I want and for us and how we grow as an organization, because I just believe there's so much potential in terms of how many environmental problems we can solve, but also like personal like haptic qualities in terms of how we experience space. I mean, it is the most some of the most rewarding, forgive me, moments of my life were when we were showing the textile house at the Solar Decathlon to guests. And, people would walk into the house, the door would shut. It was like these triple glazing passive house windows, and you could just hear it just slide ever so like gently and just suction close.
Mm.
And because it was insulated and it was fabric, the acoustics were amazing. It was like being in a recording studio.
Wow.
So people would just naturally go quiet
Mm.
and they would
Mhm.
just sit there in awe and start to pet the ceilings or
Really?
floor, right? Yeah, or the walls, I should say. And for me, that was beautiful because these people didn't know who I was. They didn't know that this was like my baby in any way. Like they were just thought I was another student showing them the house. Well, and I when you see that the work that you've made has such a strong and profound impact on people, I mean, that's like you're like, yes, that was the moment. That was what all the work was for, right? Um, and so I'm just elated that I get to do that now. And but now even tenfold more interesting because I have much more creative authorship. And on top of that, I am so blessed because um, my partner, the general contractor that I'm working with, I mean, our values are so aligned. And I think we're so clear about the culture that we want to create and the community that we want to build around this company that it's just such a gift because it's like there's so much joy on so many levels, not only with the product, but with like who the people we're working with are and like how we're going to be together as we like grow this organization.
Wow. Oh man, that's beautiful. So it just reminds me that we don't attract what we want, we attract who we are.
Hmm.
And that's true for the people you're working with in your company, but probably also for your clients and anybody who will hire you to build, which brings me to my next question. Who is your target market?
So actually I've been meeting with like the city planner of Hawaii to because like the home is optimized for off-grid applications. So we're looking for like resorts or like hard to build locations. And right now we're kind of building out our mm, sales plan strategy as well as like redesigning the house to sell to our first customers. So.
Great. So you've got a connection with Zendo. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he's the
I
one who
mean,
gave me the tour.
I would bet because boy, I tell you, this is just so cool the way things work and the way when you're awake and when you're aware and when you're conscious of
Mhm,
all of these connections that we would miss if we weren't awake to them.
mhm.
And being, you have such a way of being gutsy without being pushy.
Thank you.
So it's like a matter of fact, this is just what is, and this is what your vision, your dream is. And I feel like when you articulate that in a way that it comes from your core, it's really hard to disagree. It's hard to not go, okay. And I'm betting that's going to really serve you well as you build these community. Are you thinking about communities? Build these communities?
Absolutely. I mean, that would be great. We're definitely speaking to spoken with people in Costa Rica, speak people in Canada, people from all over the world who love the house and are ready. We just need to get going with our first one. And then
So Canada?
Canada, yes, Mexico,
But it's
different
okay.
parts
Now
of
let's
the
talk
US.
climate for a second, because the Canadian climate is not the Mexican climate. How is this sustainable in cold weather in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we built in Mongolia, right? It was -40 there.
Was it really? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
Wow.
Mhm,
Huh. Okay. This is very interesting.
mhm, mhm,
I'm going to suggest to anybody listening that you go watch this video. Again,
mhm.
I'll put it in the show notes. If you're interested at all in learning more about what Kim is up to, she and her partner and their organization, I'm betting, Kim, you'd be open to having a conversation with anybody who would want to.
Absolutely, yeah, feel free to reach out.
How do they find you? What's the best way?
You can email me at kim at uh, Dupont-Madinier.com. So it's spelled
I'll put that
D.
in.
Yeah, okay.
Is it hyphenated in your .com?
No, it's just one word.
Okay.
And
Kim at DuPontMadinier.com. I'll make sure
mhm,
you get that. Okay. And
yeah,
then they can see what more at your website. I'm betting there's more
yep,
information there.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The new website that I just finished remaking is pretty austere, but feel free to reach out and we should talk for sure.
Yeah, it is. It's you wouldn't know anything about what it is if you just looked at the website. You'd have to watch
Mhm,
the video.
mhm,
But do that if you're interested in this, because as a founder of something that is, I'm going to just go out on a limb here, and is your heart's desire, it
mhm.
seems.
Oh, absolutely.
It
Mhm,
puts together all of the things you have talked about in this conversation: art, design, sustainability, impact on humanity. All of that comes together in your own design of your own company, where you don't have to ask permission. You don't have to wait for somebody else. You can just go first.
mhm.
And that's a mark of a true leader, Kim. And that's what I recognized in you when we spent that time together in California.
Thank you. It means a lot to me. It's very kind of you.
So thank you for taking the time. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share?
Mm, I'm open. I don't know.
So
Are
maybe
there any?
we'll leave it open for part two when you get that first house built and when you
There we go.
end up
Yeah.
wherever you end up with this. And
Yeah,
if anybody's
absolutely.
listening to this and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to build an off the grid home. I do have a friend in Nevada who this would be right up his alley. He would love to be in an off the grid home. I mean, if anybody's listening, I'm guessing, Kim, you'd be open to a conversation at least.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely reach out. I'm more than happy to, speak with you, hear about your plot of land, what you got going on, what your interests are. It's a very unique design, so the more remote, the better.
So just FYI, last weekend I had an opportunity to do a retreat with a group of women from a church who were staying in a yurt in a
Hmm.
state park here in North Dakota. And I've
Mm.
never been in a yurt before. And it was really cool. The walls were fabric, but they had real windows, a real wood burning stove, a real kitchen. I mean, it was like real. They had electricity and everything at this one, but it
Very
was
cool.
my first experience in anything like that. And it was really fun.
Hmm. Very cool.
So I have just a teeny little bit of experience now that I didn't have last week.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, it's such a peaceful existence for sure. I mean, you're like one with nature and you're just in the elements, and it's just what everyone's craving for, right? Like COVID kind of made us realize that in ways that we could have never expected. And I think there's like you can feel that there's a want for a massive shift in terms of how we live for sure.
Oh, man, there's no way we would have made the decision to shut the world down if we
Of
hadn't
course.
had to.
Yeah.
And because of that, there were a lot of good things that came from that, as you've just alluded to. And yeah, I agree. There's a shift coming, and there's a reemergence and a reawakening and a
Mhm.
connection that we couldn't have anticipated on the treadmill we were going before 2020.
Yeah. So
So
it's a gift in some way.
for
Mm.
sure. Thank you so much, Kim, for taking the time and speaking with me and with our audience. And everybody, please go find Kim if you want more information. And as always, be real. Talk to you soon.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jody.
Lisa.
It's
Thank
great.
you. Gonna stop recording.